When I first saw the apartment listing online, it looked perfect. The rent was reasonable for the neighborhood, and the photos showed a clean, bright space with hardwood floors and large windows. The landlord, Richard Chen, seemed professional during our initial meeting. He wore an expensive suit and drove a luxury car. He smiled a lot and promised that he was very responsive to tenant needs. "I take pride in my properties," Richard said as he showed me around the two-bedroom unit. "Any problems, you just call me. I fix things right away." I believed him. The apartment looked good during the walkthrough. Yes, there were a few minor issues, a loose cabinet door, some chipped paint, a slightly dripping faucet, but Richard assured me these would be fixed before I moved in. I signed the lease that same day, excited to finally have a place of my own after years of dealing with roommates. That was my first mistake. The small issues Richard promised to fix never got fixed. When I moved in 3 weeks later, the cabinet door still hung loose, the paint remained chipped, and the faucet continued dripping. I called Richard to remind him. "Oh yeah, I'll get to those," he said casually. "Just been busy. Give me a couple weeks." Those couple weeks turned into 2 months. Meanwhile, I discovered new problems. The bedroom window wouldn't lock properly. The bathroom exhaust fan made horrible grinding noises and didn't actually ventilate anything. The kitchen outlet sparked when I plugged in my toaster. I called Richard again. He sighed heavily into the phone. "Look, these are minor things," he said. "I'll add them to my list. But you're being kind of picky, don't you think?" Picky? A sparking electrical outlet wasn't being picky. That was a fire hazard. But I didn't want to start a fight with my landlord in the first few months. I was young, this was my first apartment as the sole leaseholder, and I didn't know my rights very well. So I just said okay and hoped he would eventually take care of things. He didn't. October came, and the weather started getting cold. I turned on the heat for the first time. Nothing happened. I checked the thermostat, adjusted the settings, waited. Still nothing. The radiators remained ice cold. I called Richard immediately. "The heat isn't working," I told him. "It's getting really cold at night." "Did you turn the thermostat up?" he asked, as if I were an idiot. "Yes, of course. It's not working at all." He made that heavy sighing sound again. "Fine. I'll send someone to look at it." Nobody came. I called again after 3 days. Richard said the repair person had been really busy and would come soon. Meanwhile, nighttime temperatures dropped into the 30s. I was sleeping in sweatpants, 2 sweaters, and under 3 blankets. After a full week with no heat, I sent Richard a formal email stating that he was legally required to provide heat and that I needed this fixed immediately. He responded with a short message: "Stop harassing me. Someone will come when they have time." Harassing him? I was freezing in the apartment I was paying $1,400 per month for. The repair person finally showed up 12 days after my first call about the heat. He was Richard's cousin, not a licensed vac technician. He looked at the furnace for maybe 10 minutes, banged on it with a wrench, and declared it fixed. It wasn't fixed. The furnace would kick on for about 20 minutes, then shut off completely. The apartment would get slightly less freezing, then turn frigid again. I called Richard to explain this. "You're just complaining to complain now," he said. "My guy said he fixed it. Maybe you don't understand how heating systems work. They cycle on and off. That's normal." I knew that wasn't normal. But what could I do? I bought 2 space heaters with my own money and tried to survive the winter. In January, new problems emerged. The water pressure dropped dramatically. What used to be a decent shower became a sad trickle. Then the water started coming out brown and rusty-looking for the first few minutes. I documented everything. I took photos of the brown water in a clear glass. I recorded videos of the pathetic shower stream. I sent all of this to Richard with a polite message asking him to have the plumbing inspected. His response: "Water looks fine to me. You're probably just running the tap after it's been sitting overnight. That's normal." Brown, rusty water was not normal. I researched online and learned this could indicate corroded pipes, which could mean lead contamination. I sent Richard another message mentioning my concern about lead. This time he called me, angry. "Are you trying to cause problems for me?" he shouted into the phone. "The water is fine. You signed a lease for this apartment as is. If you don't like it, maybe you should move." I was shocked by his aggression. I wasn't trying to cause problems. I just wanted clean water and working heat, basic necessities that he was legally required to provide. I'm not trying to cause problems, I said, keeping my voice calm. I'm just concerned about... I don't want to hear it, Richard interrupted. You're a problem tenant. I've been nothing but accommodating, and you repay me with constant complaints. He hung up on me. I stood there in my cold apartment with my phone in my hand, feeling helpless and angry. This man was collecting $1,400 from me every month and treating me like I was the unreasonable one for wanting heat and clean water. That was when something shifted inside me. I realized Richard would never fix these problems out of goodness or legal obligation. He had already shown me who he was, a slumlord who saw tenants as nothing more than money sources to be squeezed and ignored. If Richard wanted to play hardball, I could play too. But I would be smarter about it. I spent the next 3 days doing research. I wasn't going to just complain anymore. I was going to learn exactly what my rights were and exactly what Richard's obligations were. I started with my state's tenant rights handbook, available free online. I learned that landlords are required by law to maintain habitable living conditions. This includes working heat, clean water, functional plumbing and electrical systems, and structural integrity. Failure to provide these basics is a violation of their implied warranty of habitability. I learned that tenants have several options when landlords fail to maintain properties: withholding rent, repair and deduct, paying for repairs yourself and deducting from rent, reporting to housing authorities, or pursuing legal action. But I also learned that all of these options required careful documentation and following specific procedures. You can't just stop paying rent because your landlord is terrible. You have to document everything, provide written notice, give the landlord reasonable time to fix things, and follow the exact legal process. So that's what I decided to do. Next, I researched local housing codes. My city had an entire municipal code dedicated to housing standards. I downloaded the full document, 127 pages of regulations covering everything from minimum room temperatures to required fire safety equipment to electrical standards to plumbing specifications. I read the entire thing. Twice. Then I went through my apartment with that housing code document and a notebook, checking every single requirement. What I discovered shocked me. My apartment wasn't just missing heat and having water problems. It was violating housing codes in dozens of ways. Some I had noticed, many I hadn't. I started in the bathroom. According to code, bathroom exhaust fans must actually ventilate to the outside and be functional. Mine was broken and, upon closer inspection, appeared to vent into the attic space rather than outside, a code violation that could cause mold problems. The bathroom also lacked a required GFCI outlet near the sink. The grout around the tub was cracked and missing in places, allowing water penetration that could cause structural damage. The toilet rocked when you sat on it, indicating improper installation or a damaged floor seal. I documented everything with photos and notes, including the specific code sections being violated. In the kitchen, I found more issues. The electrical outlet that sparked was obviously a fire hazard and code violation. But there were others: insufficient lighting, code requires specific minimum illumination, no GFCI outlets near water sources, a stove that wasn't properly secured to the wall, missing anti-tip brackets on the oven, and cabinet doors that hung loosely because of stripped screw holes, a sign of cheap repairs that violated installation standards. The kitchen faucet leaked. The garbage disposal didn't work. One of the drawers had completely broken slides. The range hood was greasy and appeared to have never been cleaned, a fire hazard. In both bedrooms, I found window locks that didn't function properly, security code violations, outlets with loose faceplates, closet doors that came off their tracks, and in one bedroom, a large crack in the ceiling that suggested a structural issue or water damage from above. The living room had its own problems: more broken window locks, radiators with broken knobs, which meant I couldn't control heat distribution even when the furnace worked, damaged baseboards, and several outlets that were loose or didn't work at all. Then I examined the building's common areas and exterior features that affected my unit. The building's main entrance door didn't latch properly, a security violation. Several exterior lights were burned out, creating dangerous dark areas, a safety violation. The fire escape had rust and loose bolts. The building's smoke detectors were old and possibly non-functional. My apartment's smoke detector was the cheap battery-powered kind, not the required hardwired type for rental units built after a certain year. There was no carbon monoxide detector at all, despite the gas furnace and stove, a serious safety code violation. After 3 days of careful inspection and documentation, I had identified 42 separate code violations. 42. Some were minor, missing outlet covers, broken cabinet hardware, but many were serious: inadequate heat, questionable water quality, electrical hazards, fire safety violations, and security issues. I organized everything into a spreadsheet with columns for location, issue description, code section violated, photo evidence, date first noticed, and date reported to landlord, if applicable. The spreadsheet was 8 pages long when printed. In February, I received a letter from Richard. He was raising my rent by $200 per month starting when my lease renewed in April. I couldn't believe it. He hadn't fixed a single problem in the entire time I had lived there. The apartment was literally in violation of 42 housing codes. And now he wanted more money. The letter included a condescending paragraph. As you know, market rates in this neighborhood have increased significantly. Your new rent of $1,600 per month is actually below market rate. If you choose not to renew at this rate, please provide 60 days notice as required by your lease. I was so angry I felt physically ill. Richard was exploiting me and every other tenant in his buildings. I wrote back immediately, he collected rent not agreeing to his properties but pointing out again all the raised the rent anyway because he could. I attached my documentation of the various problems and requested that repairs be completed before any rent increase took effect. Richard's response came 3 days later: the rent increase is non-negotiable. The issues you keep mentioning are either normal wear and tear or exaggerated complaints. I have maintained this property properly. If you don't want to renew, that's your choice. He had called my legitimate complaints about code violations exaggerated. He claimed he had maintained the property properly when the apartment violated 42 housing codes. That's when I knew Richard would never voluntarily fix anything. He was a bully who relied on tenants not knowing their rights or being too intimidated to enforce them. But I wasn't intimidated anymore. I was ready for war. I spent the next week refining my strategy. I had several options. Option 1. Withhold rent. This was risky because if I didn't follow the exact legal procedure, Richard could evict me for non-payment. Option 2. Repair and deduct. Fix things myself and deduct the cost from rent. Also risky and limited. I could only deduct a certain amount, and it wouldn't address all the issues. Option 3. Sue Richard for breach of the warranty of habitability. This could work, but lawsuits are expensive, time-consuming, and stressful. Even if I won, enforcement could be difficult. Option 4. Report the violations to the city's housing inspection department. Option 4 was the nuclear option, and it was the one I chose. Here's why. In my city, when code violations are reported, the housing inspection department is required to investigate. If violations are confirmed, the landlord receives an official notice to correct them within a specific time frame. If the landlord doesn't comply, the city can issue fines, restrict the landlord from collecting rent until violations are fixed, or even condemn the property in extreme cases. Most importantly, once a formal complaint is filed, the landlord can't retaliate against the tenant by raising rent or evicting them. Retaliation is illegal and can result in serious penalties for the landlord. But I knew that just filing a complaint wouldn't be enough. Housing inspection departments are often understaffed and overwhelmed. A single complaint about a broken heater might get logged and eventually investigated, but it might not result in serious consequences for the landlord. I needed to make this impossible to ignore. So here was my plan. 1. Continue documenting everything meticulously. 2. Send Richard one final written notice about all issues, requesting repairs within 30 days, creating a paper trail. 3. When he inevitably failed to make repairs, file a formal complaint with the housing inspection department, but not just a simple complaint. I would submit my complete documentation of all 42 violations with photos, dates, code references, and history of my attempts to get things fixed. 4. Move out legally before things got ugly. I'd already started looking for a new place. 5. Let the city's enforcement mechanisms do their work. The beauty of this approach was that it didn't rely on me having to fight Richard directly. Once the city was involved, Richard would have to deal with bureaucrats, inspectors, compliance orders, and potential fines. The city doesn't negotiate the way tenants do. The city has power that tenants don't. And based on my research, getting all 42 violations properly addressed would cost Richard at least $25,000, probably more. The furnace alone likely needed complete replacement, $8,000 to $12,000. The electrical issues would require a licensed electrician and possibly rewiring, $3,000 to $7,000. The plumbing problems might require pipe replacement, $5,000 to $10,000. Then there were all the smaller fixes that would add up. Richard had refused to spend maybe $3,000 in repairs over 6 months. His stubbornness was about to cost him 10 times that amount, plus potential fines, plus lost rent if the city restricted his ability to collect. The revenge would be perfect, completely legal, entirely justified, and devastatingly expensive for Richard. On March 1st, I sent Richard a certified letter, requiring his signature upon delivery, creating legal proof he received it. The letter was professional and detailed. Dear Mr. Chen, I am writing to formally notify you of ongoing habitability issues in my apartment at address, which I have reported multiple times without resolution. As my lease renewal date approaches, I want to give you one final opportunity to address these issues before I take further action. Asterisk below is a complete list of problems affecting the habitability and safety of my unit, organized by room. Each issue includes the date I first reported it to you and the relevant city housing code section being violated. I then listed all 42 violations in clear, numbered format. For each one, I included the specific problem, the code section, the date I first reported it, and a note that photo documentation was available upon request. The letter continued. These issues represent serious violations of the implied warranty of habitability and city housing codes. They create unsafe, unhealthy, and uncomfortable living conditions. Under state statute, you are required to maintain rental properties in habitable condition. Failure to do so constitutes a material breach of our lease agreement. I am providing you with 30 days from receipt of this letter to complete all necessary repairs to bring the unit into compliance with housing codes and habitability standards. Please contact me within 7 days to schedule necessary inspections and repairs. If these issues are not adequately addressed within 30 days, I will have no choice but to report these violations to the City Housing Inspection Department and pursue all legal remedies available to me under state and local law. I prefer to resolve this matter cooperatively. However, I sent the letter via certified mail and also emailed a copy to Richard. Endanger my health kept copies of everything for my records. 3 days later, the certified mail receipt came back showing Richard had signed for and received the letter. His response came 2 days after that. It was a text message. You threaten me with legal action? Fine. You're not renewing your lease. I want you out by April 30th. Find somewhere else to live. Perfect. He had just put his retaliatory intent in writing. I saved that text message immediately. I texted back, I have not threatened you. I have simply requested that you fulfill your legal obligations as a landlord. I will be moving out, but not because you're forcing me to. I've already secured a new apartment. This was true. I had found a much better place with a responsive landlord and already signed a lease starting May 1st. I was getting out regardless, but I wanted to make clear that I was leaving by choice, not because of his retaliation. Richard didn't respond to that message. The 30 days passed. Richard didn't contact me to schedule any repairs. He didn't acknowledge my letter beyond that retaliatory text. He did absolutely nothing. Exactly 30 days after he received my letter, I filed my complaint with the city. The City Housing Inspection Department had an online complaint form, but it was designed for simple complaints. My heat doesn't work or there's mold in my bathroom. It wasn't designed for what I was about to submit. So I called the office directly. Housing inspection, this is Maria speaking. Hi Maria, I need to file a formal complaint about multiple code violations at my rental property, and I have extensive documentation. What's the best way to submit everything? There was a pause. How extensive are we talking? 42 documented violations with photos, dates, code references, and a complete history of my attempts to get repairs done. Another pause, longer this time. 42. Yes, Okay, that's quite a lot. Hold on, let me transfer you to one of our senior inspectors. I was transferred to an inspector named James Rodriguez. I understand you have a significant complaint to file. I had documented numerous code violations. My landlord had refused to make repairs despite multiple requests, I had sent a formal notice giving him 30 days to comply, and he had failed to take any action. I was now formally requesting a full inspection of the property. Can you email me your documentation? James asked. Absolutely. I have a detailed spreadsheet, over 100 photos, copies of all my correspondence with the landlord, and references to the specific code sections being violated. Send everything to my email. I'll review it and schedule an inspection. This level of documentation is, well, it's unusual. Most tenants just call and say something's broken. I wanted to make sure there was no ambiguity about what needed to be fixed, I said. I sent James the complete package that same day, my 8-page spreadsheet, all photos organized by room and violation, PDFs of all my emails and letters to Richard, copies of his dismissive responses, the text where he retaliated, and a cover letter summarizing everything. James replied the next day, I've reviewed your documentation. This is one of the most thorough complaints I've ever received. We'll conduct a full inspection next week. I'll need access to your unit and also to inspect common areas. Can you meet me at the property? We scheduled the inspection for the following Tuesday at 10 a.m. James arrived exactly on time, carrying a tablet, camera, and various tools. He was middle-aged, professional, and had the air of someone who had seen everything. Let's start with the most serious issues, he said. You mentioned heating problems. I showed him the furnace, explained the problems I had experienced all winter, and showed him the photos I had taken when brown rusty liquid had leaked from it in January. James examined the furnace carefully, took photos, and made notes on his tablet. This unit is old and improperly maintained. Based on what I'm seeing, it's likely not just broken but unsafe. I'll be flagging this as a priority violation. We went through the apartment room by room. James confirmed every single violation I had documented, and he found 3 additional ones I had missed. Improper ventilation in the kitchen, the range had vented into the attic, not outside. A missing fire-rated door between the apartment and common hallway, and asbestos-containing material around some pipes that was damaged and potentially releasing fibers. Asbestos. Richard had knowingly let me live in an apartment with potentially exposed asbestos. James's expression grew grimmer as we continued. How long have you been reporting these issues? Since I moved in last May. Almost a year. He shook his head. And the landlord's response? I showed him the text messages and emails from Richard, including the one where Richard called my complaints exaggerated and the text where he told me to move out after I sent the formal notice. This is retaliation, James said, photographing the text message. That's a separate violation. We take that very seriously. After finishing my unit, James inspected the common areas. He found more violations, blocked fire exits, non-functional fire extinguishers, inadequate emergency lighting, and damage to the building's structural elements. The inspection took nearly 3 hours. By the end, James's tablet was full of photos and notes. I'm going to be straight with you, James said. This is one of the worst maintained buildings I've seen this year. Your landlord isn't just negligent, he's running what amounts to a slum building while charging market rate rents. That's unconscionable. What happens next? I asked. I'll complete my report and issue a formal violation notice to the property owner. He'll have specific deadlines to correct each violation. Priority violations like the furnace and asbestos get 7 days. Major violations get 30 days. Minor violations get 60 days. If he doesn't comply, we escalate. What does escalation mean? Fines that increase daily until compliance. Potential restriction on collecting rent. If he continues to refuse, we can pursue legal action or even condemn the property. Based on the severity and number of violations here, and the documented retaliation, I'll be recommending aggressive enforcement. How much will this cost him to fix? James thought for a moment. The furnace replacement alone, done properly, is 10 to 12,000. The electrical work, maybe 5 to 7,000. Plumbing repairs, several thousand. Asbestos abatement, that's expensive, could be 10,000 or more depending on extent. Then all the smaller fixes add up. All told, I'd estimate at least $35,000 to $40,000 to bring this property into full compliance. Possibly more if we find additional issues during repairs. I felt a surge of satisfaction. Richard had refused to spend maybe $3,000 over the course of a year. His stubbornness was about to cost him at least $40,000. Thank you for being so thorough, I told James. Thank you for documenting everything so well. Most cases aren't this clear-cut. Your evidence makes my job much easier. Cases like this are why we have housing codes, to protect tenants from landlords like this. Part 12. The Notice. 1 week later, Richard received the official violation notice from the city. I know because he called me immediately, absolutely furious. "You called the city on me," he screamed into the phone. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I reported code violations that you refused to fix," I said calmly. "Violations that put my health and safety at risk." "You vindictive little," he cut himself off. "This is going to cost me thousands." "It wouldn't have cost you nearly as much if you had just fixed things when I first asked." "I'm going to sue you for this." "For what?" "Reporting violations of housing codes that you're legally required to follow? You don't have a case. But I might have one for retaliation. I have your text message telling me to move out after I sent you the formal repair notice. That's textbook illegal retaliation." There was silence on the other end. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued, still calm. "I'm moving out at the end of this month as planned. I'm not paying the rent increase you tried to impose. In fact, based on the city's findings, I'm entitled to a rent reduction for the entire time I've lived here in substandard conditions. But I'm not going to pursue that because I just want to be done with you. I'm going to pay this month's rent at the original rate, move out, and we're done." "You can't just..." "Yes, I can. Check with your lawyer if you want, but I promise you, you don't want this fight. The city has documented everything. You have bigger problems to worry about than me now. Fix your building, Richard. That's what you should have done in the first place." I hung up. My hands were shaking, but I felt powerful. For months, Richard had made me feel helpless. Now the tables had turned completely. I moved out on April 28th. I paid that month's rent at the original $1,400 rate, not the $1,600 Richard had demanded. He didn't challenge it. He was too busy dealing with the city. The story was from
satisfying.
my new apartment, which
Richard
was wonderful.
missed the first deadline
for priority
clean water,
repairs.
responsive
The
landlord.
city issued
I
fines
kept
of
in touch with
$500
James
per day
Rodriguez
for
to
the
follow up
furnace
on what
and
happened.
asbestos violations. He finally hired contractors after accumulating $3,500 in fines. The asbestos abatement alone cost $12,000. The furnace replacement was $11,000. The electrical repairs came to $6,500. Plumbing repairs were $4,200. All the smaller fixes added up to another $8,000. Total repair costs, $41,700. Plus fines, $3,500. Grand total, $45,200. But it got better. The city's violation notice was public record. Future prospective tenants could look it up. The building's reputation was damaged. Several other tenants in the building, emboldened by the official violation findings, filed their own complaints. James told me the building ended up with 78 total documented violations across all units. Richard had to repair everything. The city restricted him from raising rents or filling vacant units until all violations were corrected. That took 4 months. During that time, he lost rental income from 3 vacant units, roughly $4,200 per month, or $16,800 over 4 months. One tenant sued him for the return of rent paid while living in substandard conditions. Based on the city's official documentation of the violations, they settled for $8,400. Another tenant broke their lease early without penalty using the habitability violations as justification. More lost income. In total, between repair costs, fines, lost rent, and legal settlements, Richard's refusal to make basic repairs ended up costing him approximately $75,000. $75,000. If he had just fixed my apartment when I first complained, it would have cost him maybe $3,000 to $4,000. Part 14. The Lesson. A few months after I moved out, I ran into Richard by chance at a coffee shop. He saw me and his face turned red. I thought he might cause a scene, but instead, he just looked tired and defeated. He surprised me by sitting down at my table. "I want you to know that you ruined me," he said quietly. I looked at him evenly. "No, Richard. You ruined yourself. You had multiple opportunities to do the right thing. I asked nicely for months. I sent you detailed letters. I gave you every chance. You chose to ignore me, to call my legitimate complaints exaggerated, to retaliate against me. This is the consequence of your own choices." Those repairs cost me everything. I had to take out a loan. Those repairs were legally required. You should have been maintaining your property all along. That's your job as a landlord. He sat there silently for a moment. Then, I never thought a tenant would actually know their rights? Would actually hold you accountable? That's what you were counting on, wasn't it? That your tenants would be too young, too intimidated, or too ignorant of the law to fight back. He didn't answer, but his expression told me I was right. Here's my advice, I said. Actually maintain your properties going forward. Treat your tenants like human beings. Respond to repair requests promptly. Follow the law. If you do those basic things, you'll never have this problem again. I stood up to leave. For what it's worth, Richard said, you were right. About all of it. The building was in terrible shape. I was a terrible landlord. I stopped and looked back at him. Then fix that. Be better going forward. I left him sitting there and walked out into the sunshine. That was 2 years ago. I still live in my new apartment, which remains wonderful. My current landlord fixes things promptly, communicates well, and treats me with respect. The difference is night and day. I looked up Richard's building online recently out of curiosity. It's been properly maintained since the city's enforcement action. The violations were corrected and there have been no new complaints filed. Current tenant reviews mention that while the building is older, the landlord is now responsive to problems. Maybe Richard learned his lesson. Or maybe he just learned that the cost of not maintaining his properties is higher than the cost of maintaining them. Either way, his current tenants are better off than I was. As for me, I learned valuable lessons too. I learned that documentation is power. I learned that understanding your rights and the systems designed to protect you is crucial. I learned that you don't have to tolerate being taken advantage of just because someone has power over you. Most importantly, I learned that revenge doesn't have to mean doing something vindictive or illegal. Sometimes the best revenge is simply holding people accountable for their actions and letting the consequences of their behavior catch up with them. Richard ignored my complaints and tried to bully me into silence. I filed 42 code violations and let the system do its work. The revenge was perfect because it was just. And that's the best kind of revenge,